Tonight, we are thrilled to be joined by the fabulous Paula McLain for a discussion on When the Stars Go Dark, her newest novel, which Kirkus has called a muted yet thrilling multi-layered mystery enriched by keen psychological and emotional insight. Paula is the New York Times bestselling author of the novels Love and Ruin, Circling the Sun, The Paris Wife, and A Ticket to Ride, the memoir Like Family, Growing Up in Other People's Houses, and 2 collections of poetry. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Good Housekeeping, Oh, the Oprah Magazine, Town and Country, The Guardian, The Huffington Post, and elsewhere. She lives in Ohio with her family. Also joining us this evening, we are so excited to welcome publicist and literary agent Julie Barer. Julie began her career as a bookseller at Shakespeare & Company, where she discovered the joy of putting books into people's hands. Her first job in publishing was at Sanford J. Greenberger Associates, and she started her own agency, Barer Literary, in 2004. Julie represents a variety of writers across literary spectrum with a special emphasis on fiction. She feels strongly about bringing underrepresented stories to light across race, class, and sexuality, and relishes the opportunity to be challenged and educated by fiction. Without further ado, please help me in welcoming to our virtual stage, Paula McLain and Julie Barer.
Yay!
Yay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I realized that we should have called each other before we got dressed tonight.
Do you think that the people's first question is going to be like,
did
you coordinate?
I think our glasses are the same. I just cut a fringe, right? So I know.
Yeah, no, it's good. I don't have the fabulous earrings.
It's just hair, right? It's just
hair.
It's just hair. I needed a change. I was tired of myself. Anyway, thank you for making time.
Oh my God, anytime. I'm so excited to be talking with you.
It's so fun. And we've actually been talking about doing this event with this store for a while. So I'm really glad that
I'm sad that you're not here at Bookhampton in person.
Yeah.
And like staying at my house. But we'll just
we'll do this instead and hopefully, when the world stops ending.
When the world stops ending.
Any second now. Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Yeah.
I have a gajillion questions.
Okay.
I wonder if a good place to start, though, would be to have you kick us off with a little bit from your beautiful new novel. And would you like some setup for the listeners and the readers? Does what you're going to read need
a little? Yeah.
Okay.
So basically the Down and Dirty plot summary is that Anna Hart, my main character, is a missing persons detective who knows far too much about the dark side of human nature. And in the early 1990s, there's a tragedy in her personal life and she reaches a breaking point. And that's really where the book begins. And at that moment, she leaves everything. She leaves her work, her husband Brendan, she leaves her family and flees, going to the only place in the world she thinks actually might be able to save her. And that place is Mendocino, California, which is a few hours north of where she's living in San Francisco. And Anna, like me, grew up in foster care. And yet, if there's any place that actually represents home to her in the many homes she's lived in, it's this place. And she goes there to heal. And yet the moment she arrives, literally the first moment she arrives, back in Mendocino, she learns that a local girl has vanished into thin air. And kind of despite good sense, despite her own well-being, she becomes hopelessly obsessed with this case. The book also has layers of real missing person cases from the 1990s. So it kind of surfs that line between fact and fiction, like a lot of my work does, my historical novels. And I'm just going to read to give you a flavor for Anna's voice. And you really don't need to know anything except what I've just told you. The novel begins, she reaches this breaking point and she flees. And this is just the moment she's in her car, basically heading toward Mendocino. The air feels like bathwater as I leave Santa Rosa, and the sun glitters obscenely. Even the unkempt motel parking lot is a garden. Half a dozen silk trees with feathery fuchsia drag queen blooms. There are birds everywhere, in the branches, in the smudgeless sky, in the broken neon Jack-in-the-Box drive-through kiosk, where 3 fuzzy chicks stare at me from a nest threaded with drinking straw wrappers, their throats so pink and open it hurts to look at them. I order a large coffee and an egg sandwich I can't eat before cutting over to Route 116, which will thread me through the Russian River Valley to the coast. Jenner is the town there, a postcard more than an actual village. Far below Goat Rock looks like a giant's crude toy ball against the dizzying blue of the Pacific, the sort of magic trick Northern California seems to do in its sleep. In 35 years, I've never left the state or lived anywhere south of Oakland, and yet the beauty still guts me. Stupid, effortless, ridiculous beauty that goes on and on and on. The roller coaster of the Pacific Coast Highway, the sea like a slap of wild color. I pull over and park on a hard little oval of dirt just off the side of the highway, crossing both lanes to stand on a bald place above snarled brush and black sawtooth rocks and bursts of spiky foam. The plunge is dramatic, dizzying. The wind comes at me, clawing every layer of clothing so that I have to hug myself, shaking, and then my face is wet suddenly, tears coming for the first time in weeks, not about what I've done or not done, not about what I've lost and can never get back, but because there's only one place I can go from here, I realize, one road on the map that means anything to me now, the way back home. For 17 years, I've stayed away from Mendocino, locking up the place inside myself like something too precious to even look at. Right now, though, on the edge of this cliff, it feels like the only thing keeping me alive, the only thing that's ever been mine. And if you think about it, most of us have very little choice about what we're going to become or who we're going to love or what place on earth chooses us becoming home. All we can do is go when we're called and pray we'll still be taken in. So.
Oh my God, people, how can you not buy the book after you hear it? I just, like, you have no heart or soul if you don't go buy it.
I have to say you're a little,
don't say I'm biased.
Objective.
You know, every time I hear you read that part, it reminds me that for you, place is a character. I mean, and this has really been true in all your books, right? Paris, Africa, Cuba, Spain,
right,
California.
right.
Where you set these novels and how these characters are physically part of the landscape they're in is so much a part of the story for you.
Yeah.
Do you think about that intentionally when you start to write the story, or does that come out as you're writing?
It's really interesting. I think I've learned that about myself over time. And it was pointed out to me by a reader. I was on tour for Circling the Sun, and which is set in colonial Kenya. And a woman stood up during the Q&A after the event, and she said, "Okay, I just have one question. Where are you taking us next?"
Yes.
Not who are you writing about next, but where are you taking us next? And after I laughed, I thought that's really kind of astute, because yes, I have to, I don't know, maybe it's the kind of reader I was when I was a kid. And the kind of reader I was when I was a kid is exactly the kind of writer I am now. Like, in a way, there's been no progress. I read just full tilt, like over the edge, like trying to disappear in the world of the story.
And then that's what you do. You create
and that's exactly
a
what
world
I
the
do.
reader
I say sometimes that I'm putting on the world of a book like Harry Potter puts on the invisibility cloak. And
that's a good line.
And honestly, it's kinetic when something's working for me. If first of all, if I can't imagine a place, then I can't send the reader there. I can't make you believe you're there. I can't do it with enough depth and dimension and concrete detail so that you can feel your way into that experience.
But how different is it doing that when you actually haven't been there versus a place like California where so Paris. Paris
You'd be
Paris
surprised. No, you would be surprised how little that changes. When I wrote The Paris Wife, which but maybe not everybody knows, I had never been to Paris, nor could I afford to go to Paris because I was flat broke and, writing my face off in a coffee shop in Cleveland. And that level of dreaming my way there and reading everything I could about 1920s Paris and Olive Hemingway and Fitzgerald and Pound and Gertrude Stein and all of that, it was like a magic carpet ride. It just projected me into that world so viscerally and profoundly. Honestly, I think it's why I wrote the book so fast. It's why I think I kind of never got over that book.
But is it different to write a book from a place like California that is that you're so personally connected to?
Is it different? I have to say it was maybe the act of kind of climbing inside. That's what I do. I sort of climb inside the world, and it's why all my books are in the first person. I climb inside a body and I look out through my character's eyes and I see the world as she's seeing it. But for California, this time I have to say it was a pure pleasure because I haven't lived there since my 20s. And so it was like a love letter. The whole book was like a love letter to California. And who doesn't want to go to Paris? True. But for me, just to be able to live in the world of Northern California for the time that I was writing the book was really amazing and restorative. I miss home,
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot that's different. I mean, there's so many of the same themes you touch on through all your books, but there's a lot that's different about this book than your last 3 books. This is a departure away from the historical fiction that you had been writing. And I wonder if you could talk about what was liberating maybe about that departure and what was terrifying about taking that departure.
Right. Well, that it wasn't conscious, that I, wasn't sitting around thinking, I need to make a change. I'm tired of writing these historicals. I was in the middle of writing Love and Ruin. So I was in the voice of Martha Gellhorn. I was in Spain in 1937, surrounded on 3 sides by Franco's army. Like that was where I was when I went on a dog walk one day. And then this character, Anna Hart, just sort of came blasting at me through the sky, which is kind of how ideas work. It's very mysterious, the imagination. And so we can have these ideas, right? But we get to decide what to do with them. So I remember telling you, I have this crazy idea. And you're like, I love it. Now finish your book.
Stop cheating on the novel you're writing with another novel.
But I really need to thank you because you could have told me when I said, listen, I have this crazy idea. You could have told me, yeah, no, I don't think you can do that. I don't think that sounds like
I've never heard. I mean,
you would never do that. But some people would, and in fact, sometimes it can be dangerous to speak our deepest wishes out loud to the people we love because they might be trying to protect us, right?
Right.
Stay in your lane, do what you're doing, and maybe later, but really, you just said go for it, and so.
Well, what you told me about it was so compelling and exciting, and that was before you'd really figured much of.
Before I'd figured much of it out, because a lot of that figuring it out takes place in the writing. So I just started with the character, I had this idea that whatever it was that was happening in her personal life, this tragedy that sort of propels her into the plot line, has everything to do with how she makes contact with and is connected to the victim. That the victim was not going to be a thumbnail. This was going to be a full-blown character, and that this intimacy that they share, even though they've never met, is something that's profound, and it's because of their background. So Anna grew up in foster care. She learns the victim, Cameron Curtis, was adopted, and it's kind of a big leap that she makes, saying, maybe I know something about this girl because I know about displacement, and chaos and uncertainty and confusion. I know what happens when the fabric of your family life gets ripped out from underneath you, and when your name is changed in an instant and your siblings are taken from you, and all of this. So they share this emotional DNA, and they both share that with me. So I wanted to write this book. Yeah, that was.
So this is, I mean, in many ways, it's different from the last 3 books. You always put a lot of yourself and your energy into your books.
Yeah.
But you've been sort of hemmed in a way by these real women and their real lives. This is not a real person, but you brought a lot of your own real life lived to her. And what was that like?
It was a great surprise to me because, as you say, it's the first time in a dozen years I've had carte blanche to write a completely made up character. And I really, really enjoy that deep dive that I do into biography to find out sort of what's the untold, unseen, unshown. What's the bit of this person's life we don't know that maybe they don't like to talk about themselves, and sort of all that to draw out and to make that intimate and dramatic, and all of that is a pleasure. So here it is, like, okay, I can write any character in any moment in time and anything can happen. And strangely, what I learned as I got deeper and deeper into the book was that here I had this blank slate, and that Anna was a character I could give all of my obsessions, like everything that I think about and read about and care about. I could make her care about those things too. And one of those things is trauma, sort of particularly developmental trauma, what happens in childhood, how we try to make peace with the burdens of the past. What does it mean to heal? Can we actually do that from severe trauma? Can we save ourselves? Can we transform our lives? And then if we can, how? Sort of all those questions. And so I had Anna think about all those questions too. And it really gave me a bigger canvas to explore some of those.
Did it feel more vulnerable, this book, than other books, knowing that that piece was so personal?
Well, because I did it a little at a time, it's like layers of paint on a canvas. It wasn't until the last draft, I had written 4 drafts before I kind of peeled off that last layer of tape or whatever, veiling. And early drafts, these characters happen. Eden, who in the book are Anna's foster parents, in early drafts, they were her grandparents. And I realized, in fact, a friend who's a writer pointed out, like, listen, in the book, you're telling the story about your childhood. So why not kind of do it more directly?
Yeah.
And I realized it was an opportunity for me to kind of step more fully into that space. And yes, it's vulnerable, but it's also really important, I think, to sometimes connect the dots more overtly and to speak to a story maybe that people don't like to talk about or isn't talked about a lot. Like there are, the trauma that informs Anna's life and the victim Cameron Curtis's life. These are sometimes difficult. It's difficult material, but if we don't speak it out loud, then we can't sort of open. It's one of the things literature can do, right? Is can show
Make us feel seen and make us make our
exactly
most intimate or personal or scariest experience recognize that other people have been through it, and then we're not so alone.
Exactly. And this is something that's happened in the book, which, you know, since it's been published, which has made me feel really validated and sure that it was the right thing.
I was going to ask you about that,
Mm-hmm.
what it has felt like. I mean, you wrote an incredible model note essay about your childhood, and what you've been through and what you carry with you and what you're working through.
Mm-hmm.
What has it been like to sort of put all that out there in such a public way?
Well, it's both and, right? It's both incredibly terrifying and exposing to do that, to say to, you know, a couple million people, like, this is my experience. And I got 1,000 letters, you know, sort of a louder, more deeper, more emotional response to that piece than probably anything I've ever written before. And some of it was me too, you know, I too experienced abuse as a child. And I felt so honored, honestly, to be receiving those letters. But a lot of them said, listen, I don't see myself much in essays or in novels, and it took my breath away. And this makes me feel less alone. You know? Right. So
there was a great line from your wonderful New York Times book review, which
maybe is framed on my wall.
Maybe
give you.
A book full of darkness lands with a message of hope. I'm curious how important you feel hope is and what that played in telling this challenging, difficult story of trauma and sadness and loss.
I think it's incredibly important to me. Actually, hope is the engine that pulls us through all of the book. And there's a tremendous amount of urgency in Anna's search for this girl, because she believes she's lost all of her chances. Right? And she's basically surrendering to, this is sort of my last opportunity to do anything good. And the way that she gets entangled with Cameron Curtis is obsessive. It's not good for her. And yet it's also how she realizes in a painful way that this is her life's purpose, that she was put on this earth to do this difficult work, and like it or not, she has the tools to do this difficult work. And it's not really until she throws everything out and really commits to saving another that she in fact has an opportunity to save herself. And this is what I actually believe, you know. This is what I believe. And I believe that we can be led through trauma to our life's purpose. I believe that I was led through trauma to my life's purpose, that the scared little kid I was, falling into the world of books, putting on stories like Harry Potter's invisibility cloaks, kind of looking for escape. I was building a writer. And the sensitivity that I was growing, and the empathy, and really the power of the imagination to transcend anything. That's some big ass magic right there.
That's right. I'm so glad you just led us to magic. And my next question, which is, can you talk? There's like an electric spirituality. I don't know what the word is. There's something in the book there's like a little sprinkling.
Yeah, there is a little sprinkling.
The veil, right, opens a little bit.
Yeah. And so one of the characters, Tally Hollander is her name, and she is a psychic medium, and she is introduced to the storyline because she has a vision about the missing girl. And Anna in the story is not a believer, basically, is deeply skeptical, and we're not sure whether or not this is a hoax, if she's some sort of this is a shell game, if she wants attention or money, and in the end, the Tally Hollander character doesn't reveal any major points of the story to us. It's not like she sort of leads
the crime,
Anna to
right?
She becomes a kind of arrow for Anna to, she's more like a therapist, to trust herself, to trust that she's drawn here for a reason, to trust the sense that she has a connection to this girl, to trust this difficult lesson that this work that she's doing is her life's purpose. And I get asked a lot, like, so do you believe in psychics? Is this why you put a psychic in the book? And honestly, I don't know why I put a psychic in the book, except that
she was meant to be.
Because she was meant to be, this character came to me, the gay characters come to me, and I just really liked what she opened up in Anna. Like all of these, you know, if you think of the protagonist in all of these ways that the secondary characters open or reveal something about them. For instance, there's a dog in the story, this dog Cricket, who Anna meets, and again doesn't want to have anything to do with this dog, but then is made aware that she needs help, and that the dog somehow realizes before she does that she needs a partner, and that she really needs somebody to count on, a physical body who she can absolutely rely on, and that can warm her up and really kind of resuscitate her heart.
There, one thing that's not different about this book in comparison to other books is that there are some real people, some real history. Can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
so that was also a surprise. And I love this about a novel, actually. You know, there are writers who
you're not as much of a control freak as some other writers who are like, I do not like to be surprised.
Yeah, I never know what's going to happen. I just sort of jump in and say yes, and then discover along the way. And in the same way that it was very late in the book that I took off this last layer and made the book more autobiographical, early drafts of the book were set in 2016. You know, we're set in current day. I didn't mean to write anything that was historical. I really wanted to be a current novel, and yet I kept running into these problems. You know, you saw early drafts of the book. It was like a bunch of FBI agents in a room. It was like procedural, and they were talking about blood spatter patterns. It was like an episode of CSI, and I felt like a fraud writing it, and I wasn't interested. That was really the problem. And and what I wanted to write, which is what I write, is character driven, you know, more thoughtful. And so I decided to set it at random in 1993. I'm like, okay, no internet, no DNA,
no traceable cell phone, no
CSI, no laptops, no FBI agents in rooms talking about blood spatter patterns. And then the minute I did that, it was already set in Northern California, in this town, in late September. And so I just moved it. I moved it to 1993, and everything stayed the same. And as I'm working on the second draft of the book, and I was trying to deepen Anna's voice and really increase her veracity, sort of like her believability as this person who's lived in the skin, you know, these missing kids and her experience. And so I was listening to a podcast where one retired FBI agent was interviewing another. And again, I was just looking for language and concrete detail the way we do, you know, when we're doing research, just basically throwing rocks down a well and seeing if anything makes a noise. And suddenly I realized that it's an FBI agent named Eddie Fryer who's being interviewed, and he was the lead detective on the PolyClos case.
Right.
Right. So PolyClos, if you don't remember, was a 12-year-old girl who was kidnapped at knife point from her bedroom while during a slumber party in Petaluma, California on October 1st, 1993. And October 1st, 1993 is literally 10 days after my imaginary girl went missing. 60
Right. And then the hair, all the hair in
Yes,
her.
60
Like,
miles away. So it's the same geographical area within 10 days. And, you know, they're similar ages. And I just thought, okay, freaky. The universe sometimes just kind of throws up these really,
Yes.
really interesting moments.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just had to believe from that moment on, like, okay, I don't know exactly how this
Right.
works, except I have been doing this for a while, you know, blending fact and fiction,
Yeah.
working in the historical facts on record. I had never done it about with subject matter that was so sensitive.
Yeah.
And so it became really, really important to me to do it with as much heart and caution and love as possible. And it started to become increasingly important to me that I was writing about real life victims, because, you know, here I was writing a story, and yet this had happened to this family and many, many other families, and they couldn't escape it the way I could by closing my resource materials. And so weaving the real names of these victims and their families into the book became a really, I did not take it lightly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's really conscious on my part to bring in, one review called it truthiness. And the thing about truthiness, the thing about truth, it will keep you honest.
Yes.
It will keep
I
you
mean, it's
honest.
interesting because it's different, I feel like, than when in the past we've talked about, you know, maybe writing about Hemingway or writing about Martha or any of these sort of larger than life. They're almost celebrities, right?
Right.
Characters that you've written about before, they're sort of,
Right.
and they've put themselves into the public
Mhm.
intentionally, right?
There still is always like a little bit of that feeling. And I always check myself. I always check and double check myself at the door. Like, do I have an agenda?
Uh-huh.
Is this all done, again, with love and respect, and
Right.
am I giving them dignity? Is there something
Right.
honorable about the way that I'm doing this? I work really hard never to be exploitive, never to be sensational. Right. Yeah. And so the coolest thing happened. I think I told you this, but maybe I didn't. I don't remember. I got an email through my website from Eddie Fryer's daughter-in-law, who happens to be a writer, who said, "Oh my God, you've written about PolyClos, and I recognize my father-in-law in this book.
Oh my
And
God.
shall I put you two in touch?"
Yes.
So we still, I know, haven't been able to work out a time. He's very, very involved still in the PolyClos Foundation, even though he's retired. And this is
Wow.
really the cornerstone of his life, not just the cornerstone case
Oh
of his
my
life,
God.
but a pillar in his life. And I sent him a copy of the book, and I sent his daughter-in-law a copy of the book, and I got a note back from him saying how touched he was by the book. And he sent me a bona fide FBI coffee cup. And I wish I had it here. It's like for reals. It has the and everything. And I just swooned when I opened it. And my 16-year-old daughter, Finn, is across the room when I'm opening it. And I'm literally jumping up and down and saying, "No way, no way." And she's like, "What happened?" And I told her, and she's like, "You know, some really cool stuff happens to you. I think this is top 10.
Oh,
This
yes.
is top 10. You have an FBI coffee cup."
Yes, it's true. Cool stuff. I mean, you went to go see the Finca. Like, nobody else has seen the Finca.
Yes, I did get to go inside Hemingway's home in Cuba, where people kind of look through the window because it's owned obviously by the government, by
The Cuban government.
Cuba's still, a communist country. But the curator of the museum, when I applied to go, had read The Paris Wife in Spanish and loved it. And so it was sort of like this little, and these books have given me really kind of a magic ticket.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it's not the other way around, right? I was able to go to Paris because I wrote The Paris Wife.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to go to Africa to follow in the footsteps of Beryl Markham because I wrote about Beryl Markham, and so it's very interesting. And of course, who could have told that 8-year-old girl hiding in the bookshelves?
Right.
Hang on, sister.
Your life.
Because one day it's going to be really good.
You write across every genre. You write, every medium. You write poetry, you write nonfiction, write historical fiction,
Short stories.
You've written suspense.
Yeah. I've written screenplays. Yeah.
Is fiction your favorite? Do you think you will go back to different formats at some point?
I think the novel is my form. And the reason it is because I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing inside of it. You know how we are both people who rev really high, right? So we have all this energy and talk a mile a minute, and it's why we scare people when we get together, cackling and talking over each other. And, my kids know I don't sit down when I'm in the house. I'm always moving, and I'm always talking, and I'm always doing things. And okay, so for people like us, sometimes, for instance, a yoga class can maybe not work because it's not enough to take you out of your head, in the same way that writing a poem is not enough to take me out of my head.
Interesting.
Because it's like this perfect it's a little box. I used to write these tiny, terse little 14-line lyric poems. And a short story is also a kind of box, and it has a structure, and it's a box that opens and closes. You can see the whole thing at once. And a novel is something you can't. You put a scene down somewhere and you might spend all day looking for it, and you have to trust that it's still there. And it's sort of like juggling plates and chainsaws and polar bears. Like
That's terrible.
I know, doesn't it sound terrible? Maybe it's the masochist in me that it takes every single book teaches me how to write it, that it takes kind of everything I am, all of my thoughts and my best ideas. But also a novel is slightly ahead of me.
You're chasing it a little bit. You're like, I feel it. I can hear it. It's like, I gotta get it down.
Right. It's just it's like shimmering ahead of me. And it does start to feel like a novel has its own agenda. And some days I'm led into the meeting where I get to understand what's on the agenda.
And some days
the connection doesn't work. I'm not even in the room.
I think that would be helpful for people to hear, because your writing is so effortless. It just, when, reading you to me is like reading poetry.
That way.
The lyricism of your work is.
Thank you. It doesn't always feel that way. Hemingway said, there's no one way to write. Sometimes it feels effortless, and sometimes it feels like moving, busting the rocks out, and listening to the charges blast. I sometimes say it's like going through Chicago on your face. It's just
That's hilarious. That's a good one.
The days it doesn't work, it's just like, it's the worst possible thing. But what I live for is the best days, where everything disappears. And it's like that perfect reading experience when I was a kid. It's like everything falls away and it still works, right? Aren't we always dying to read that book where it doesn't matter what time it is, and it snags us in immediately, and we are helpless.
Yeah. What do you do on the
Basically,
days when it's not working? Do you go for a walk? Do you make a cup of tea? Do you?
I do it anyway. You know, I sit and I look at it anyway. And
Mhm.
part of it is that I don't want it to see me sweat, you know?
It's literally watching you.
Like I'm sneaking up. I told a friend once, I'm sneaking up on the days writing like a lion in the veldt, you know, like maybe it doesn't know I'm here.
Hilarious.
No, I just want that. You snorted. I love you so much.
So,
Snorted.
because if it can't see you, and you're like, I'm gonna trick you.
I just want to put in the time. And sometimes I say, you know, writing a novel is sitting down every day and loving this thing that comes
Doesn't love you back.
And then over time it starts to trust you and it starts to love you back.
It's like a new, like a cat.
You know, you have this mutual trust and there's the relationship. And so I try to touch it when I'm working on something and I'm really deep in, I try to see it every day. I try to visit it every day and to do a little work every day. And if I don't, then that other day, the next day becomes that much more difficult. I once, and I'm trying to think, Water for Elephants, Sarah Gruen. I once did an interview with Sarah Gruen in Miami for the Miami Book Festival. And we were both talking about this thing, and she was, you know, on deadline and, you know, had locked herself in the closet or something because she was on deadline and she was afraid that if she left the world of the book, it was going to take her days or weeks
to get back in. But
Mm-hmm.
life, I mean, you're a mom.
Oh, I know. And
we lived in a pandemic.
And life just keeps showing us that anything can happen, that we're not in control, that uncertainty is just the rule and not the exception. Yeah, which makes it all the more precious to really put our faith in the things that are right in front of us. Oh, hi.
Oh, hello.
See, we were just like,
we just keep going.
I don't want to interrupt you both. I'm just sitting here taking it all in. But we do have some questions that have rolled in from our audience. Great. Thank you, everyone who is sending questions in. Feel free to continue. Paula, you did touch a bit on your writing process and how it might be a little bit different across these genres that you so beautifully master. Are you more of a plotter then? Can you talk a little bit about are you more of a drafter? How does your process exactly work for a novel?
I am not a plotter. That would be great if I could be, to save myself some time. No, my process is really intuitive and disorganized or organic. That's another word, organic. I usually follow a voice. Something comes to me. Like I started this novel on Beryl Markham, Circling the Sun, the day I had the idea. I hadn't done the research. You
heard her voice in your head.
Yeah, I heard her voice in my head. I hadn't done the research yet. I didn't even know that both of us had been abandoned by our mothers when we were 4 years old, that we had this intimate, profound connection. I didn't know that she had met Ernest Hemingway. Like I didn't know anything about this woman. It's crazy. So yes, no, not a plotter. And I know people work that way. Amor Towles famously plots the book out for years in his head. My friend Christina Baker Klein has her note card. She knows, she does research forever until she knows what her story is. But I'm following like this piece of magic string, you know, and hoping it leads me this place. And I'm in for the ride. I'm all in.
Wow. Well, your readers love it. I have a comment here from one of our viewers. It says, Paula never disappoints. Such a joy to read her books.
Oh,
thank you.
I agree.
Thank you.
Agreed. And another viewer says, I wonder whether Paula will be visiting faculty At the Newport MFA again in the spring. I will be a student there.
Ah. Oh, I did an event with Anne Hood.
Oh, I love her. Yeah.
Do you know Anne Hood, Julie?
From Breadloaf. Yeah.
Yes, she's so lovely. And
Oh.
she and I were at an artist colony called Yada together years ago and played a lot of hearts. And
I was just
Scrabble.
at a Yada benefit, and the woman who runs it just spoke so fondly of you, literally on Saturday night. It was like,
Oh, really?
"How's
That's
Paula?"
so nice. That's so nice. But yeah, and then Anne married Michael Ruhlman, who's a Cleveland boy and a chef. And right, so I did this event with Anne for the Newport MFA program. So will I do it again if Anne asks? And if she makes me dinner or Michael makes me dinner.
I mean, I think Michael, yes.
Yes.
I'm sure Anne can cook chicken.
Anne can cook up a storm. Yeah, she's like old school Italian. And
Oh, nice.
they're always, follow her on Instagram, Julie. They're always cooking something that you just want to die for.
All right.
All right. So this next question, I so agree with what Julie said earlier about how Paula creates a place for us in her books. Paula, what are you working on now and where are you taking us next?
Great.
Wiring
Julie's
mine.
where? I don't exactly. I think I know, but I don't think I'm ready to talk about it because it's really fresh and I'm really superstitious. But I can tell you that this thing that happened when I had this idea and took this great risk to kind of throw myself into this story and learn everything that, it's very humbling. I have to tell you, I had just reached a level of facility in my work in historical where I thought, okay, now I know how to write this kind of book, finally. And then suddenly another idea comes and it's like, oh, back to kindergarten. Now we have to learn about red herrings and, right, clues and.
Yes. Yeah.
But there is something really, I don't know, liberating and rich and rewarding when we realize just how much there is to learn in any given moment.
Yeah.
And that even though it's scary, we're going to be better, bigger people, artists, women, what have you, because of it. So that feeling when the ceiling blew off and as terrified as I was, I thought, okay, now something is really happening. I just want to keep doing that. So whatever it is that's happening next, I'm hoping that it brings as much opportunity for me to grow as this book did. It really was wild. And thanks for being there all along the way. Julie is my first, best, perfect reader. And, I don't say that very lightly. So
it's an honor. Really.
Well, using this intuitive process from start to finish, we have a question here. How long does it take for you to finish a book on average?
Forever.
Is there an average? I will say Paula never misses a deadline, ever.
I never have.
Never, ever. If she says she will get it done by Monday, she will get it done.
Well, and sometimes I give myself imaginary deadlines because I know a deadline works for me.
Yeah.
And so it varies. I wrote The Paris Wife in 7 months. That was the first draft. My first novel took me 5 years.
Okay.
Right. And this last book took me probably, what was it, Julie, like 2.5?
I was going to say 2.
Yeah, 2. I think it depends. I had a lot to learn this time. And when I was working on my first novel, I had 3 different part-time teaching jobs. I had 3 kids, like a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old and a teenager. And my husband worked all the time and I, had an hour a day to write. So if I had an hour a day to write, I was going to take it, but it's hard to write a novel that way.
One tiny bit at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
did you find it more difficult to release this particular book into the world with it having such strong emotional ties?
Yeah, I think I had a little more anxiety about the reception, and I didn't know if my readers, for instance, were going to follow me, or if I had ticked enough boxes for the suspense world. The readers are very particular in that genre, and yeah, there was a lot of fear, but there's always a lot of fear once the book leaves your nest and the piece that you can control is over, and then it's somebody else's job to take it and sort of, whisk it through the process, and then it becomes a book in the world. And once that happens, all bets are off. Like how it does, how it will live, whether it will make any kind of mark or go gently into that good night, like we don't have any control over. We can wish and hope and pray and, make voodoo dolls and build bonfires. Right. Yeah, it's a tough, I have to say, that part maybe people
Never
don't
gets easier.
understand it. That part never gets easier
For anybody.
We
I don't
need
know
to
a
if it's
single,
going to be okay.
I don't
right?
know a writer, no matter what level of success, no matter how many prizes or bestseller lists or anything.
Tell the story, Julia, when you worked for Shakespeare and Company and the first time you were given the task of
I worked for Shakespeare and Company. It was an independent bookstore downtown in Manhattan that I asked to work at because I was spending all my money there. And I was like, do you guys do employee discounts? And I was so excited. I was like, and then my boss handed me this list. And I was like, okay, what do I do? And he was like, go grab all the books on the list. And I was like, okay, are we doing like a display? Do you want me to like write little things about them? And he was like, no, we're returning them. And I was like, what now? And he was like, well, like those huge boxes came in on Tuesday. And I was like, yeah, the new books. And he's like, yeah, well, where are they going to go? And I was like, where the old books are? And he's like, yeah, the books that haven't sold.
the books.
And I was like, no, you can't, there's good books on this list. You can't do that. And it was like, I mean, I like went into the bathroom and wept. It was just like, that, what is that line? They shoot horses, don't they? It's like, are you return books? That's like sacrilege. And sometimes with the mass markets, they rip those covers off. It's like, it's literally horrible.
Yes.
But the amazing thing about an independent bookstore is that people who work there feel that way. And I finally said to him, if I can sell one copy of each book on this list, can we keep one copy? And he was like, be my guest.
Did you do
and I was like, okay. And I just went onto the floor and I was like, who needs a book rack? I got a book rack.
Mad hand selling skills.
I mean, but it's a tough biz. It's a tough biz.
I just felt all of that.
Yeah, you did. And independent bookstores, felt it this last year more than anybody. Authors felt it this year more than, I think there's always very confusing stories in the news about like, oh, it was a great year for buying books. And all these people last year would be like, I guess the pandemic's great for book sales, right? Because like everybody has nowhere to go, nothing to do. And I was like, first of all, TV is a problem. Like there's so much good TV. Second of all, we're all obsessed with the news. So nobody has any real concentration and can't actually read a book.
Right.
And there's literally no discoverability. So you can't walk into a bookstore and pick a book up and be like, oh, it's interesting. I think I'll
looks
get
good. Turn it over. Look at the flap copy. Yeah.
For this person before. Oh, I didn't realize that author I like has a new book out. No. So the books that really did well in the last year and a half were the names that everybody already knew, and the book, the people who are already big, and the things that felt very safe and secure because so much was so unsecure and unsafe. And it was just a really, traumatic year in many ways for everybody. But
Well, let me ask you this then. We had a listener ask, what's on your bedside table? What's on your bedside table, and what authors have particularly inspired you maybe in general or through this crazy past year and currently?
Julie, what's on your bedside table?
Oh, okay. I just went on vacation, so I got to read. I read 6 books, which was very exciting. I took all the apps off my phone. I read The Magician by Colin Toibin. That's coming in the fall. That was fascinating. It was about Thomas Mann. Did not know anything really about Thomas Mann. I read the new Ruth Ozeki because I just love Ruth Ozeki so much, and I will read anything by her, and I think she's brilliant and amazing. I read Louise Penny, who I think I turned Paula onto.
Absolutely.
I read her last book. She's just a genius, and I would read anything she wrote. I literally can't remember and or see anything. It's a little stack over there. I read Mexican Gothic. That was super cool. I always try and read something that's a little bit outside my, path and is very successful, so I can sort of understand marketplace wise. Like, this is a horror book.
I had a hard time getting into that one.
As did I. But I was very interested in what it was doing and thinking about why it was working. And yeah, I did have a hard time getting into it. And I read, this amazing book, Paula, you would love this, called Light Perpetual by Frances Spufford, which I bought at Bookhampton right before I went on vacation. Okay. And I bought it because it's not a debut. It's longlisted for the Booker. And the premise of this is this is so cool. The premise of it is that there are a bunch of children standing in front of a Woolworths, World War I in England. There's something in the window that's new. It's like a phonograph or something. And so they're there. There's like 6 children, and they're there with their various families or mothers. When a bomb lands, and everybody dies.
Oh, wow.
And the novel is what their lives would have been.
Oh my God.
Each child's path that never was, but would have been.
Interesting. That sounds
And
beautiful.
it's so good. It's
tragic. I do like a tragedy, I have to say. Yeah.
So what's on your bedside table, Paula?
So lately, I have been reading a lot for blurbs. This, unfortunately, is not rare for me. My nightstand is usually things I need to read. But at the top of the pile is Therese Fowler's new book, which I think comes out next spring. And also this book, which Julie has recommended to me.
I'm obsessed with
it. I know it's an unknown title, unknown author.
TikTok.
No one's heard of it.
TikTok, you don't stop.
Yes, it's fantastic. And so
I thought you might like that.
Yeah, yes, thank you for that little bit of it's beautifully written, even though it's escapist and there's magic in it. And Julie turned me on to a book that we both really love, The Impossible Lives of Greta Wells by Andrew Sean Greer, who won the Pulitzer Prize for his book Less. And there's a similar sort of thing. I think we both of us like, I don't know, we like magic, don't we?
I love magic. I love magic.
And a little romance and some beautiful writing.
Ill-fated lovers.
Ill-fated, yes, a little tragedy thrown in, a sprinkling of tragedy.
Oh my gosh.
Halcyon bargains, all the good things.
I'm just glancing at the clock and realizing we're already at 8 o'clock, but I want to ask one more question before we wrap, if that's okay. What do you hope readers take away from When the Stars Go Dark?
Yeah, I think it's this idea, I'm often asked, is writing a novel this personal, a cathartic experience? And I usually say no, no, it doesn't. Catharsis means that we're writing something out of our system. And I always believe that we tackle subjects to get closer to them, right? To write them into our systems, to bring them closer to our hearts and to really confront them. But I was listening to this beautiful podcast about tragic theater and about how now there's here's Crowley, by the way. And he just jumped up, so there's no choice now but to say hello and then to drop him. He's very large, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, that's a belly.
There's Crowley. This beautiful podcast about tragic theater and about the nature of tragic theater and how the point is not catharsis for the players, but catharsis for the audience, because as soon as we see this dramatic exploration of something that seems larger than life, but in fact is life itself, right? This is what, the thing about trauma is it's ordinary and extraordinary. It changes our lives and it happens to everybody. Like both of those things are true. And so if someone, even one person reads my book and says, I see myself and I see now how much more is possible and feels that they're not alone, then the book will be a success. And that is catharsis. That is release, and that brings change. And so I think it's possible to write a book that has a social message and also is a page turner. And I believe now more than ever, if we're not talking and thinking and writing about what's in front of us, the challenges before us, the important stuff, then it's a gross disservice, both to ourselves and others. There's just too much. There's too much to tackle. There's too much to talk about. There's a lot on our plate right now as a human species. So let's get busy.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect place for us to leave off tonight, as much as I don't want to end this.
Yeah, this has been really fun. Thank you. Thanks for
both.
hosting us, Julie. It's true. I could talk to you forever. I prefer to do that in person.
In person.
Bolognese pasta, but until then, I love you to death. And thank you so much.
Thank you both so much.
Someday I'll come to the store and I would love it.
Yeah.
Yes. And to all of our guests, thank you for joining us. Reminder, When the Stars Go Dark is out and available for purchase by Paula McLain. You can go to bookhampton.com. You can go to rjjulia.com, or of course, you can always visit us in store. Until next time, happy reading all and have a fantastic night.
Good
night.
Thank you. Okay.